Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one at a time. And before I get into it too far, I just want to apologize for the weird angle and all that. With the new webcam, I am still trying to figure everything out with this. The last couple months I was too zoomed in because of the new program. This one I'm recording via the capture video thing on the Wondershare editing program I used, which explains why you also see that. But trying to get this thing angled just right on there, but yeah, I'll probably figure it out again before I click record on the next one. And if I also seem a little this is also the second time I've had to record all these ones, because the last time the audio and video didn't sync up, which is how I know, I already threw away, that my last webcam is officially dead and it wasn't just a program, because it wouldn't record with the other program, which I'll probably get rid of it. Now this is episode 22 of season 7. This is Baggage. It's an episode written by Tucker Colley, and this is one that got some Emmy love. Although his last 3 episodes of the season, the last one got some Emmy love. Whereas the last one got some Emmy love when it comes to acting, this one got it for writing, because Tucker, thanks to his writing, this episode won Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series, so we got to applaud Tucker for that. And the genesis for this episode's idea actually came from his real life, because he had a very similar experience to what Ray and Debra had in this episode with his own wife, a very passive-aggressive fight about who's putting away a suitcase. Hopefully it wasn't as passive-aggressive here and they resolved it better, but we'll get into that when I start talking about the plot. Now, in the lead up to the series finale, this was voted the 4th favorite episode of the entire season, which makes me wonder what 3 episodes beat it, but given how much I enjoyed the episode with this rewatch, I can definitely say it deserved that. Another little high praise from the fans there. Now, we've seen Ray and Debra have a lot of fights throughout the show. A lot of them are stupid fights. But this one's going to take the cake because it's an argument over who's putting away his suitcase. Now, the episode begins. Ray's sitting on the couch. He's eating cheese. He got the cheese from someone he knows for helping him. And it's a cheese sampler, so he's got a lot of different types of cheese, even some weird ones, including Grofert. Keep that cheese name in mind for later. Robert comes in. He wants to borrow the suitcase for his trip when he goes on his honeymoon later. And Ray's like, yeah, I'll probably be there when you get back, or when you get in here to take it. And Ray starts telling him. Now, this is a device we've seen them use before in the show, where we talk about what incident is starting the problem of the episode at hand, and then it goes there. Of course, the one that really comes to mind is the can opener. Now here, instead of fighting over a can opener and seeing the flashback from 2 points of view, is we see it all from Ray's point of view, and it's all about the suitcase. Now, keep in mind that that's why some of the weird stuff is, because it's following the way that Ray is telling the episode, like how Frank and Marie get up and just leave right away. Probably didn't happen that way. But the main thing is the way that Debra says some of the stuff she says in this little flashback story that Ray is telling. Now, they get back from their little vacay. They're too tired to put the suitcase away, so they leave it on the landing. Now, Dave's goodbye suitcase is still there. Ray notices it, and he's like, oh, Debra hasn't put it away. Now, I do like that Robert does defend Debra a little bit here, like, oh, what she does during the day isn't work. I'm not saying that. It's just, you know, I got work too, and she's passing it all the day. She should move it and all that. Now, the sticking point for Ray is that one day he notices it still has been moved, but Debra's wearing an outfit that she took on the trip, which means she had to have gone into the suitcase, got it out, put it on, hopefully after washing it, and didn't move the suitcase. So she's doing this intentionally, he thinks. So in order to get back at her, Ray takes an outfit from the suitcase, puts it on, and walks in front of her while she's laying on the couch. Now, he's just making it really obvious with how he's wearing it that that's what he did, because he's got the outfit on, it's all wrinkled, collar's up. Debra doesn't respond. So he decides, like, oh, if he's going to be passive-aggressive and not move it, I'm not going to move it. And it's still been there, and it's been over 2 weeks. Now, at one point in the flashback, Ray stubs his toe on the suitcase and makes a comment to Debra like, "Oh, that suitcase is still there." And this is the part, sorry about the background noise, where I mentioned that the way that Debra says this stuff, you can tell is Ray putting a spin on it, and that is, yeah, I guess it is. And they've just had the standoff over the suitcase, and neither is moving it. Now, I'm going to interject my opinion on this whole suitcase fight right here. Both of them are being childish about not wanting to move it, and both of them could have taken the time to move it. Like Ray, when he noticed it was still there, he could have been the bigger person, picked it up, and took it upstairs. Doesn't mean he had to unpack it, but at least take it up. And if he wanted to be a better person and actually unpack it, there. Or at least empty the stuff that's got to go into the washer, But this is Ray we're talking about. Of course he's not going to do it. Now, Debra, with Ray not moving it, the moment she got into the suitcase, she should have moved it up top. The fact that she doesn't tells me that either she has noticed it like Ray, which I kind of doubt considering something that she's going to say later, unless it's her revelation she's not the only one that noticed. Or two, she just was oblivious like Ray, which could be a little bit, but not as active as Ray. Now, either way, Debra didn't move it. Ray's thinking, okay, she's playing games with me, and he decides not to move it, and 2 weeks on, that's where we are. And Robert, of course, has the reaction a lot of us are thinking, like, really? You guys are fighting over this? Of course, eventually Ray has to go on the road for work, and he's like, oh crap, now I gotta be the one to move it. And of course, by this point, Frank has found out about the Mexican standoff. And he comes over, he's talking with Ray about it. And Frank's reason, for Ray not moving the suitcase is that it's now in Debra's domain. It's full of laundry, all womany now. And of course, to add to this, where they're talking about the trip, Ray mentions that he was the one who had to lug the suitcase around whenever they had to move it. So it's like tit for tat. You move the suitcase when we're on the trip, Debra should be the one that undoes it. Which I guess, when you think about it, is a nice little trade-off. But then that's something they should have talked about, which, as we've seen time and again, if there's one big failure in Ray and Debra's relationship at times, it is the lack of communication. Or should I say proper communication. And here we do see that a lot. Now, Ray goes upstairs, pack his own little luggage. And then, of course, he does it in a way that intentionally cues Debra into the fact something's going on. And Frank has this little conversation with Debra about the suitcase, which leads to a very great outburst from Patricia Heaton in character. She's like, "You had 2 weeks!" And this is why I'd say that Ray's not the only guilty one here, because of the fact that Debra mentions that, you know what, at first I thought he was just oblivious, but the fact he talked with you about it knows he knew what he was doing. Because that tells me that she, like Ray, actively noticed the suitcase was not there, and she decided not to move it, or just wait for Ray to move it. Which is like real mature, Debra. You could have been the bigger person too and moved it. Real mature to just leave it there and then turn this into a fight about nothing. Or over nothing, I should say. But you gotta have that friction for it to be funny, I guess. And it works here. But it's just one of those ones like, this fight could have been so easily avoided. But then again, when you work around people enough, you see that sometimes we tend to do stupid stuff. Our emotions rule our logics a lot of the times, and in this case their emotions do rule their logic. But Debra still does debate Frank a little bit, where Frank does try that little logic with him, and then Debra throws a lot of stuff back at him, and he's like, you obviously have been spending a lot more time thinking about this than I have. Now, to be fair, like I mentioned, if Debra did notice all that crap, she doesn't really have a leg to stand on with some of the stuff she throws back. Some of it, of course, ties into issues we've seen with Ray throughout the whole course of the show, which, to be fair, Ray does need to approve on all that, but like I mentioned just a bit ago, the fact that she went into the suitcase and pulled out her outfit, at that point, she should have moved it. Now, Ray comes down the stairs with a couple items in a grocery bag. They get into a little argument about moving the suitcase, about whose responsibility it is. Debra rips the bag, he grabs another one. And this is where the cheese comes into play. That cheese is in the episode for more than just a snack for Ray. For this, it is a Chekhov's gun, and Ray's about to pull it. he is going to pull out the Roquefort, which I have not eaten Roquefort myself, so I do not know how bad it is. I haven't even eaten Limburger. But if you're around dairy enough, you know that certain dairy products, more specifically cheese and sometimes yogurt, they all have certain smells about them. Depends on how much they're aged and what they're aged with. Like blue cheese has a certain smell because of the mold on it. Greek yogurt has a certain smell because of that pungentness with it. I don't know exactly what they do to make it different. Give it that little sour twang. And the sharper cheddars have a different kind of smell than, say, like a young cheese. And of course, as it has barely any moisture, something like Parmesan also has a very strong smell too. Now, Roquefort apparently has a very pungent smell, so it's stinky on its own. That already should tell you where Ray's thinking and where his mind's going and what he decides to do. He's going to use the cheese as a weapon against Debra to get her to move the suitcase. What does he do? He takes the cheese and he sticks it in the suitcase. And that's going to make the house so smelly that she'll have no choice but to move the suitcase. Okay, battery warning, sorry about that. And he's like, see you in a couple days, and he leaves. And then we cue to a while later. Marie comes over. Both her and Debra notice the smell, and they track it to the suitcase. And of course they're like, oh my god, it's Ray! Ray! And of course Marie doing her usual, like, with the door. You can't put cheese in a suitcase. True. Now, the two have a nice little heart-to-heart. And of course we find out that Marie noticed that the suitcase had not been moved. And she's like, you think I wouldn't notice the suitcase there for, forget how many days she says, but it shows she's got a good eagle eye. If she lived in a different decade and was younger, she would have made a good security officer just from how observant she is. Of course, without she talks to people, that's a different matter, but that's a different situation. Now, as I mentioned at the end of the previous episode, we do get a little bit of a lore dump here, and it is tied back into the situation with Ray and Debra in the suitcase. Their big old fight over it. And that is the big fork and spoon that we see hanging on the wall in the kitchen. Now, if you're very observant with it, which I'm going to say that even though I went into this review series thinking I'm going to look at and keep track of when apparently they move position, I never did. But apparently if you do, they move position, even though in universe their position that they are in this episode is supposed to be where they've always been. Now the big fork and spoon were apparently a wedding gift for Frank and Marie. There's some little jokes there. Oh, I thought they were Robert's baby utensils. Apparently they were a gift to the couple from Frank's side of the family. Both of them hated him. But their argument and their first fight as a married couple happened because who should return it? Marie felt Frank should return it to his side of the family that gave it to him. Perfect logic. Frank felt that Marie should return it since it is all womanly, to use his own words against him. And as Marie puts it, they're technically silverware. A little bit misogynist, the way to think, but you could see why in the time that they would have been married in, it might have been good logic. And even now, depending on how you look at it, if you put it nicely, it's like, technically it's a kitchen thing, and that's your domain, hon. You could see the logic there. Neither of them budge, and it goes into a big old fight, where Marie goes to her mother and say, when I come back, you better be the only ugly thing. But Frank, in his defiantness, nails a spoon to the wall, and Marie sees it when she gets back. And you can only imagine how young Marie probably reacted to that. How'd she react? She took the fork and nailed it to the wall slightly higher. And as Marie puts it, every day she's gone to that kitchen and looked at those two things, she's thought about that fight. Every day, for the 40 plus years they've been married. And she tells Debra, don't let that suitcase full of cheese become your big fork and spoon. Now, the little bit of wisdom that Marie's imparting here is that this fight, well, it looks like it's been bad, and of course the whole back and forth with it, don't let it gnaw at you. Do not let this be something that explodes into something bigger than it should be. Of course, it's a little bit too late there. But don't let it consume both of you and be a big elephant in your guys' room throughout your marriage, and hopefully potentially not end your marriage. Be the bigger person. And of course, Debra's thinking of it, and she tells Marie she should be, but Marie scoffs at it at first. But hold on to that thought, because it'll come back in the epilogue. Now Ray returns, And when they see each other, you could tell that they both already are regretting the fight and regretting a lot of the stuff. Ray specifically is regretting using the cheese as a weapon. As he puts it, cheese. I love it so, and yet I used it as a weapon. They both make up, and it looks like the fight's going to be over, but then they go upstairs to kind of have a make-up tryst, as it were. And they start talking about the suitcase again, and it goes from, oh, wasn't it the point of the makeup? To them getting doing a little bit of a fight over who's going to put it away, which is the perfect way to end the fight. And then Robert comes in to borrow the suitcase. And he has a good line. You know, I'll borrow it, but the airline won't let me take on all three of you. And of course, ends in a way you would expect. Now the epilogue ties back into Marie trying to take her own advice, and she does. She goes in the kitchen, Frank's there eating. She doesn't eat a fork and spoon, and she's doing her usual thing like, I'm going to rise above 40 plus years of pettiness. The big fork and spoon are coming down. She's making a production of it. Given how much you love the theater, you can definitely see Marie doing this. She goes to take him down. Her mistake. Because since they've been up there 40 plus years, the wallpaper has aged around them, meaning that even with them off the wall, there's a silhouette of them. And with how anal retentive and OCD we've seen Marie is on certain things, I can imagine that she's not going to like that. So she quickly puts him back up there and then looks at Frank and like, I hope you're happy. Now, there's two ways it could have gone with this. The typical way they could have gone is Frank, once Marie goes out, be like, I win. Took 40 years, but I win. Something like that. That probably would have been a predictable route. And while the end joke they end on it with is a little predictable too, it is, I think, a little bit funnier than that. It's where he's looking at it all confused, he's like, when did we get those? Now the reason I think that's a little funnier is because the last time these are mentioned before the end fight with Ray and Debra is that Marie mentions you're taking his side now, suggesting that Frank had mentioned like, hey, maybe we should take it down, you know, it's a stupid fight years ago, we shouldn't do that. And Marie is like, nah. Which makes the question, if Frank wanted to take it down, why didn't he just take it down himself? Or maybe he has Marie just put him back up as a reminder. Just one of those weird things. Maybe it was an early on thing and then just Frank put it out of his mind and just hasn't thought about it the same way she has. And that's why he's like, why did we get those? It's just something that he just hasn't actively thought about because it's been something he's just seen in his peripheral. Either way, it does end this episode on the perfect note. And with everything this episode encompasses, I can definitely say it deserved the Emmy for writing. It deserved to be voted the fourth favorite. And in my honor, it is definitely one of the best of the season, one of the best of the series, and without a doubt it is going to be on the VHS list I'll be doing at the end of this review series. Now, we got 2 more episodes to talk about. The next one, while not quite a filler episode, does kind of fill the same void that a filler episode would, in that it is a nice little break in between 2 big episodes, or big-ish episodes from a writing standpoint. But it also continues the marriage thing, because we got a little bit of Amy's bridal shower. Now we're going to get a look at Robert's side with the bachelor party. And it does not go the way that Robert thought it was going to. But that will have to wait until next time, guys.